Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The light of the setting sun bathed the small town of Silver Creek, a tranquil atmosphere punctuated by birdsong and the rustling of leaves. John Harrington, a 68-year-old veteran, walked slowly along the sidewalk, his steps measured, his hands slightly trembling. Every wrinkle on his face told a story, of distant battles, lost comrades, memories that no apparent peace could erase. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the screech of tires. A patrol car stopped abruptly beside him. Officer Kevin Mallory, with a hard, impatient look, got out of the vehicle, followed by Lisa Brandt, a young recruit with a serious face. "Mr. Harrington, you are under arrest," Mallory said curtly, without explanation. John stopped, surprised. "I think there's been a mistake," he said calmly, but his eyes expressed quiet determination. "I haven't done anything wrong." Despite his protest, Mallory advanced roughly. The handcuffs closed around his wrists. A murmur rippled through the passers-by, some shocked, others silent and helpless. The veteran offered no resistance, but a cold anger settled in his eyes. Every gesture, every movement of the police officers now seemed disproportionate. Inside the car, John remembered his days in the army, the impossible missions, the unpredictable enemies, the calculated strategies. All of that had taught him to remain calm in the face of danger. And now, he felt he needed that same patience and that same strength. 30 minutes later, the usual commotion was interrupted by a distinct sound, a powerful rumble of engines, and a blue-red flash unlike the usual flashing lights. Black cars stopped precisely in front of the police station. Officers from the FBI, led by the Special Agent Rachel Thompson, descended with the authority that only a federal institution could impose. Mallory and Brandt froze, realizing too late that they had just arrested a man whose name carried a weight that neither their arrogance nor their ignorance could measure. John remained seated, motionless but observant. His face, etched by time, reflected an almost supernatural calm. He knew this arrest would become much more than a simple police mistake. Tonight, justice would strike, and the lessons to be learned would be forever etched in the memory of all those present. The police station of Silver Creek, it smelled of sweat and disinfectant. The white neon lights glared off the walls, revealing dust and regulatory civil rights posters. John Harrington, he was sitting on the metal bench, his wrists still bruised from the handcuffs, his back straight despite fatigue and age. Officer Lisa Brandt, she, seated on a chair opposite him, nervously tapped her files. "Mr. Harrington, can you explain why you were in this area?" she asked, her voice hesitant. John looked at her calmly. "I was taking a walk, as I do every evening. I helped my neighbor pick up her groceries that had fallen on the sidewalk. Nothing more." Next to Kevin Mallory, he frowned, visibly frustrated. He seemed to be searching for a flaw, an excuse to justify his initial arrogance. But every word John uttered was measured, precise, and he could feel the weight of his story's legitimacy resting on Mallory's shoulders. The phone rang, breaking the tense silence. The police chief, Captain Roger Donovan, he picked up the phone and listened for a few seconds. His eyes widened and he hastily hung up the receiver. "What, the FBI?" 30 minutes, he exclaimed, his voice betraying panic. Mallory and Brandt looked at each other, unsettled. The seconds stretched into hours. An invisible tension filled the room, and John sat motionless, observing everything. He knew this situation would change the power dynamics in this position. Soon, a distinct rumble could be heard outside. The flashing lights of the FBI's black vehicles illuminated the lobby. Special Agent Rachel Thompson, he entered with his team, his authority instantly palpable. His eyes scrutinized Mallory and Brandt with icy intensity. "You arrested John Harrington without evidence?" Rachel asked, her voice firm. "You violated procedures and endangered a citizen and a decorated veteran." Mallory stammered, unable to reply. Brandt lowered her head, aware that they had just crossed a line they couldn't erase. John, for his part, didn't move. His face was impassive, but his eyes shone with quiet determination. He knew the storm had just begun, and that the tempest would strike those who had abused their power. The lobby of the police station was now filled with a heavy energy. The FBI agents displayed their authority effortlessly, their piercing gazes sweeping every corner, every local officer. John Harrington he remained seated, his back straight, his hands folded on his knees, observing the scene like a silent strategist. Agent Rachel Thompson took the initiative. "Officer Mallory, are you going to explain your decision to arrest Mr. Harrington without evidence?" His tone left no room for maneuver. Mallory, visibly flustered, stammered, I thought I was doing the right thing." He matched the description. To a vague description? Thompson interrupted, his eyes burning with reproach. "You arrested a decorated Delta Force veteran. Do you realize what that means?" John, calm but firm, added, "I never asked to be arrested. But every mistake has a price." His words echoed in the room, and even Brandt felt the gravity of the situation weigh on his shoulders. The phone rang again. This time, the Captain Donovan he picked up the phone with visible nervousness. He listened for a few moments, then nodded, his face drawn. "Yes, understood. We will fully cooperate." Agent Thompson turned to John. "You're not just a veteran. Your name, your past actions, they carry legal and moral weight that this city cannot ignore." John nodded gently. "I never sought confrontation, but respect cannot be bought with a uniform. It is earned through justice and responsibility." Mallory and Brandt froze. Memories of their own careers, their hasty decisions and past mistakes, suddenly seemed to overwhelm them. The FBI agents began examining files, surveillance cameras, and anything else that could prove legitimacy or wrongdoing. John looked around him, taking in every detail of the room, every reaction of the police officers, as if he were analyzing a mission. His military past wasn't just a story, it was a silent force, ready to remind others that experience and discipline are more valuable than arrogance. That evening, in the cold, sterile lobby, John Harrington grasped a simple yet essential truth: sometimes, it is not force that commands respect, but patience, justice, and the conscience of those who hold power. And those who abuse that power were going to learn it, sooner or later. The office of Captain Donovan, it was cold, sterile, but saturated with tension. John Harrington sat facing Mallory and Brandt, his piercing eyes assessing every micro-expression, every gesture. Agent Rachel Thompson stood nearby, imposing her presence, ready to intervene at the slightest attempt at intimidation. "You must understand the gravity of your actions," Thompson began, his voice icy but controlled. "Arresting a veteran without evidence is not only illegal, but morally reprehensible." Mallory tried to defend himself. "We followed the procedure." "Well, we thought we did." His voice betrayed a fear he could no longer hide. John, calmly but with natural authority, replied. "You mistook an old man for someone else, you ignored the facts, and you acted out of arrogance. You forgot what it means to be responsible for your actions." Brandt, feeling uneasy, lowered her eyes. She realized that she had let her fear and inexperience guide her actions, and that this simple gesture had almost destroyed the life of a respected man. Officer Thompson produced a thick file. "Look at this. Military decorations, recommendations, honorable service. Mr. Harrington is not just a citizen. He is a veteran who served with distinction in Delta Force. Your arrest without cause puts him in danger, and you will be held accountable for it." Silence fell. Even Mallory, who had always wanted to demonstrate his superiority, felt crushed by the reality of his mistakes. John, impassive, observed their discomfort, but without anger. His strength came from his calm, his conscience, and his dignity. Then he added, "I never sought revenge. But every mistake has a cost. Today, you have learned a lesson you will never forget." Rachel Thompson concludes the meeting. "The FBI will monitor your conduct and ensure that this never happens again. This is not a threat. It's the law." As John left the office, Mallory and Brandt remained frozen, humbled and ashamed. They had just realized that they had underestimated not only an old man, but a veteran whose life and history commanded respect. In the corridor, John took a deep breath. The weight of his past, his sacrifices, and his experiences had prepared him for this moment. He knew that his mission was not to punish, but to remind everyone that justice was not an abstract concept, it was a moral imperative. And that night in Silver Creek, this truth had just struck with the silent but implacable force of a veteran who could not be ignored. A few days later, the sun set on Silver Creek, bathing the city in an orange light. A public meeting had been organized in the town hall. Curious and worried citizens had gathered. Local journalists were present, cameras and notebooks in hand. The atmosphere was heavy with tension and anticipation. John Harrington entered, motionless and dignified, accompanied by the agent Rachel Thompson. All eyes turned to him immediately, not with contempt, but with respect. Every step he took seemed to measure the weight of his history and experience. Mallory and Brant sat at the back of the room, silent and ashamed. They knew that their mistake was no longer just an isolated incident, but a public lesson they could not escape. John spoke, his calm but firm voice echoing in the room. "I never sought confrontation or revenge. I served this country to protect its citizens, not to be unjustly arrested. Respect cannot be bought with a uniform or a badge. It is earned through justice, humanity, and responsibility." Each word was spoken with gravity. The murmurs in the room gradually died away, replaced by total attention. Even Mallory couldn't look away. Rachel Thompson added, "The FBI oversaw this case and took all necessary steps to ensure the law was upheld. This is not only a victory for Mr. Harrington, but a reminder that no one is above the law." John concluded, "Every mistake has a price. And those who abuse their power must understand the consequences of their actions. Today, I hope this lesson will remain etched in your memory." The applause began slowly, then became a torrent of appreciation. The residents of Silver Creek understood that sometimes, a single man could remind everyone of the value of integrity and justice. Mallory and Brant left the room, silent and transformed. They knew they had learned something that neither time nor experience could have taught them otherwise. John Harrington, for his part, stepped out into the evening light, breathing deeply. He hadn't sought glory, but he had reminded everyone that justice, however slow, always catches up with those who deny it. And for Silver Creek, that night, respect and dignity had triumphed.